I had always dreamed of having a natural birth. No needles. No machines. Just me, my baby, and the strength of my body. Maybe it sounds silly to some people, but I had been preparing for this moment for months. I read all the books, took breathing classes, and even practiced pain control with my husband using deep meditation. I felt ready, nervous, of course, but ready. From the beginning of my pregnancy, I told everyone who would listen, no epidural. I didn't want to be numb. I didn't want to be hooked to a machine. I wanted to feel the moment my baby entered the world. I believed in my body. I believed that pain was part of the journey. My mom had all three of us naturally, and she always said it was the hardest and most beautiful thing she'd ever done. I wanted that experience too. When I shared my plan with my doctor during one of our last appointments, she gave me a kind but tired smile. "You say that now," she said, "but most women change their minds when the pain hits." I smiled back, but inside I felt annoyed. Why didn't anyone take me seriously? My due date was fast approaching, and I had everything prepared. The hospital bag was packed, the baby's clothes washed and folded, and the car seat installed. Every night, I would sit in the nursery rocking chair and imagine holding my little girl. I had picked out her name already. Hope. Because that's what she was to me, a new beginning. The night before I went into labor, I couldn't sleep. I felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. I kept going over everything in my head. What if something goes wrong? What if the pain is too much? But I shook those thoughts away. I reminded myself that women have been giving birth naturally for centuries. I could do this too. Around 3 a.m., I felt the first contraction. It was like a strong cramp in my lower belly. I sat up in bed, held my breath, and waited for it to pass. Then came another. And another. I woke my husband and told him it was time. We grabbed our bags and headed to the hospital, my heart pounding with both nerves and excitement. When we arrived, they checked me in quickly and took me to a labor room. The nurse asked me how bad the pain was on a scale from 1 to 10. I told her it was around a 5 and that I planned to go natural. She gave me a short look and nodded. "We'll see how you feel in a few hours," she said, typing something on the computer. That comment stuck with me. "We'll see." It felt like everyone was already waiting for me to give up. As the hours passed, the pain grew stronger. The contractions were getting closer and more intense. I breathed through each one, just like I practiced. My husband held my hand and rubbed my back, telling me I was doing great. The nurse kept coming in to check on me, and each time, she asked if I wanted the epidural yet. Each time, I said no. Around hour 6, I was tired and shaking. The pain was sharp and deep, but I was still focused. The nurse came in again and this time she was more pushy. "You don't have to be a hero," she said. "There's no prize for suffering. You should really consider the epidural." "I don't want it," I said clearly. "Please note it in my file. I want a natural birth." She sighed loudly and walked out. I could feel the judgment in the air. Like I was being difficult. Like I didn't know what I was doing. Then the doctor came in. Someone I hadn't met before. My regular OB was off duty, so I got whoever was on call. He was older, serious, and barely looked me in the eyes. He glanced at the monitor and checked my dilation. "You're at 5 centimeters. We've got a long way to go." I told him my birth plan. I told him I didn't want the epidural. "We'll keep that in mind," he said flatly, and walked out. Something about the way he said it didn't sit right with me. At that point, the pain was blinding. I was crying, sweating, trying to stay calm. I asked for a birth ball, soft music, anything to help me manage. The nurse came back in and adjusted the monitor on my belly, then turned to my husband and said, "She's not going to last much longer without it." I looked her in the eye and said, "Please stop bringing it up." I said no. She just smiled tightly and said, "Okay." But deep down, I didn't feel safe anymore. The pain was getting worse, but I was still in control, or at least I thought I was. Every contraction felt like a wave crashing over me, then pulling back just long enough for me to catch my breath. I focused on my breathing, just like I had practiced. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. My husband kept wiping the sweat off my forehead and whispering, "You've got this. You're doing amazing." I kept telling myself the same thing. "You've got this. You're doing amazing." But somewhere deep down, I felt a growing fear. Not of the pain itself, but of the people around me. The nurses were cold. The doctor hadn't come back. And no one really seemed to care that I had clearly said no to the epidural. Still, I stayed strong. Every few minutes, the nurse would pop in and ask, "Ready for that epidural now?" Every time, I said no. And every time, she would raise her eyebrows like I was making some foolish decision. She stopped hiding it. Her tone got more impatient each time. She even started saying things like, "You're going to be begging for it soon, and there's no shame in giving up." But I hadn't given up. I was in pain, yes. I was scared, yes. But I wasn't broken. By the time I reached 7 centimeters, I was shaking. My whole body was tense. The pain was constant now, not just during contractions. I was exhausted. The nurse came in again, this time with another woman who looked like an anesthesiologist. She didn't say who she was. She just smiled and said, "We're going to help you feel better." I sat up quickly. "No." I said, "No epidural." The nurse gave me a tired look. "Sweetheart, you're clearly in distress. You're not thinking straight." "I'm thinking clearly," I snapped. "I do not want it." The anesthesiologist paused for a second. "We'll wait then," she said, then turned and left. I thought that was the end of it. But an hour later, everything changed. I had just gone through the worst contraction yet. My entire lower body felt like it was on fire. I was crying, gripping the bed rails, trying so hard to stay calm. The nurse came in again, this time with a different tone. She wasn't asking anymore. She said the baby's heart rate was dropping and they needed to manage the pain to manage the stress. I didn't even get a chance to respond before she added, "Doctor's orders." My husband looked confused. "Wait, what's happening?" She said, "No epidural." The nurse ignored him. "Roll to your side," she told me. "We're prepping you now." "No." I cried. I said no. But another nurse had already come in and started pulling supplies from a tray. I tried to sit up, to push myself away, but I was weak. I was trembling. I was in pain. One of the nurses gently held my shoulder and said, "You'll thank us later." My husband raised his voice. "She doesn't want it. You need her consent." But no one stopped. The anesthesiologist came back, and everything happened so fast. My husband tried to step in, but a nurse asked him to give them space and guided him out into the hallway. I started panicking. "No, please, don't do this." I begged. I screamed. I cried. But they did it anyway. I felt the needle go into my back. It was like a burn, then a cold rush. My body tensed, and then everything started to go numb. But not in the way I expected. My legs didn't just go heavy. My whole lower body felt strange, disconnected. And I started to feel dizzy. My head was spinning, my vision blurry. Something wasn't right. "I can't feel my chest," I whispered. "I can't breathe." The nurse looked at me quickly. "You're okay, it's just the medicine kicking in." "No, something's wrong," I said again. I tried to move my arms, but they felt weak. Then I felt this crushing weight on my chest, like someone had placed a concrete block on me. I gasped for air, but nothing came. I was choking, without choking. My eyes went wide with fear. "Please." I whispered. Alarms started to beep. One of the machines went off loudly. Nurses rushed in. My heart was pounding so fast I could hear it in my ears. The last thing I remember was someone shouting, "We're losing her." Then everything went black. The first thing I remember was the sound of a slow, steady beep. 1, 2, 3. Then I felt something tight around my face. It was a mask, an oxygen mask. My lips were dry. My throat burned. My eyes were heavy, like they were glued shut. But I could still hear. Machines humming. Footsteps. The soft shuffle of paper. Then a voice. "She's awake." Slowly, I opened my eyes. The lights above me were harsh and white. Everything looked blurry, and my whole body felt like it had been unplugged from life. I couldn't move. My arms were weak. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me. For a second, I didn't know where I was, or even who I was. It took a moment before everything came rushing back. I was supposed to be in labor. I was supposed to be holding my baby. Panic hit me like a lightning bolt. I turned my head and whispered, "Where's my baby?" But the words came out scratchy and broken. My husband was by my side. His face was pale and swollen from crying. He grabbed my hand and kissed it, whispering, "You're okay. You're okay now." I didn't feel okay. I felt like I had been pulled from a nightmare into something even worse. "What happened?" I asked, my voice cracking. He hesitated, then looked down at the floor. "They gave you the epidural, and something went wrong. Your blood pressure dropped. Then your heart, it stopped for a few seconds. They had to resuscitate you." I stared at him in disbelief. "I told them no," I whispered. "I know," he said, his voice shaking. "I told them too. I tried to stop them. But they didn't listen. They said they had orders from the doctor, that they had to do what was best for the baby." I wanted to scream. But my throat felt like sandpaper, and my chest ached every time I tried to breathe deeply. So I just cried. Tears rolled down the sides of my face and into my hair. I felt completely powerless, like my body didn't belong to me anymore, like my voice had meant nothing. "Where is he?" I asked again. "Where's the baby?" My husband didn't answer right away. He looked at the nurse, who had quietly walked in. She glanced down at the chart in her hand and said gently, "Your baby is in the NICU." My heart dropped. "Why?" I asked. "There were complications during delivery," she said. "After your vitals crashed, they had to perform an emergency C-section to get the baby out quickly. He wasn't breathing at first, but they were able to revive him. He's stable now, but they're keeping him under observation." I tried to sit up, but pain shot through my stomach and back. I gasped and fell back against the bed. "You had surgery," the nurse said. "You need rest." "I need to see my baby," I said, still crying. "I'll bring photos," my husband offered. I took some. "He's beautiful." Photos? That's not what I wanted. I didn't want pictures of my baby in some plastic box with tubes sticking out of him. I wanted him on my chest. I wanted him in my arms. I wanted to feel his skin against mine and whisper, "I'm your mom. I'm here. I love you." But instead, I was trapped in a hospital bed, stitched up, weak, and confused. My son had entered the world during chaos. He had taken his first breath under fluorescent lights, not in my arms. He had felt gloved hands instead of mine. Cold air instead of my warmth. And I wasn't there. I was unconscious. And none of this was my choice. Later that day, a young doctor came to see me. He introduced himself as Dr. Martin. He looked nervous, like he knew something was wrong. "I just want to explain what happened," he said. "Your vitals were very unstable during labor. The team felt that pain management was necessary to stabilize you and reduce stress on the baby. The epidural was administered to help with that." I told them no, I said again, this time louder. "I understand," he said. But the team believed it was a medical necessity at that point. A necessity? I laughed bitterly. Was it necessary for me to stop breathing? Was it necessary for me to wake up in ICU without even touching my son? He had no answer. He just nodded and said, "We'll make sure you're monitored closely from now on. I'm very sorry this happened." But sorry didn't fix anything. Sorry didn't take away the trauma. Sorry didn't erase the fact that I was robbed of one of the most important moments of my life, and that my baby entered the world while his mother was unconscious on a cold table. I looked down at the 4 in my arm and the bandages on my stomach. I felt empty, broken. But one thing was clear. They didn't listen to me. They took my voice away. But now, I was awake, and I was going to fight to get it back. The next morning, I forced myself to sit up in bed even though every part of me hurt. My stomach throbbed, my back was sore, and my legs felt like jelly. But I didn't care. I wanted to see my baby. The nurse helped me swing my legs over the side of the bed. My hands shook as I held onto the rails. My husband stood beside me, trying to keep me steady. "Are you sure you're ready?" he asked gently. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure at all. I just knew I needed to see my son. They wheeled me down the hall in a chair. Every turn, every bump in the floor sent pain shooting through my spine. But my heart was beating faster now, faster than it had in days. I was finally about to meet my baby. I imagined him wrapped in a blanket, maybe sleeping peacefully. When we got to the NICU, the nurse opened the door slowly. The room was quiet except for the soft beeping of machines and tiny sounds from newborns all around. The lights were dim, and everything smelled like antiseptic and baby lotion. Then I saw him. He was lying in a clear plastic crib, hooked up to wires and tubes. His tiny chest rose and fell so gently it looked like he was barely breathing. His eyes were closed, and his little hands were curled into fists. I covered my mouth to stop myself from sobbing. He looked so small, so helpless, so beautiful. My husband helped me stand up, and the nurse guided me closer. I reached out slowly and touched his hand. His fingers were warm, and when I spoke his name softly, his hand twitched. I lost it. I broke down completely. "I'm here," I whispered. "Mommy's here. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." A NICU nurse gently rubbed my back. "He's strong," she said softly. "He's been fighting since he came out. Just like his mom." Her words gave me some comfort. But at the same time, I couldn't help feeling like I had failed him. I should have been there. I should have held him right away. I should have protected him from all this. For hours, I sat by his side, holding his little hand and whispering to him. I told him about the books I planned to read to him, the lullabies I had sung while he was still in my belly. I told him how I had dreamed about the moment I'd hold him on my chest and feel his heartbeat next to mine. But that moment had been taken away from both of us. Later that afternoon, I requested to speak to the head nurse and the hospital administrator. I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. I needed to know why no one listened to me, why they thought it was okay to ignore my consent. The administrator came in with a file and a rehearsed look of concern. He sat down across from me and said, "We deeply regret what happened. Your case is under review." Under review? I asked, my voice trembling with anger. "Do you realize that I almost died? That my heart stopped? That you gave me something I explicitly refused?" He nodded. Our team believed they were acting in the best interest of both mother and baby. In emergencies, decisions have to be made quickly. But there was no emergency before the epidural. I snapped. I told them no. Repeatedly. And they still did it. My husband added, "I was there. I heard her tell the nurse and the doctor. She said no. Loud and clear." The administrator sighed. "We're investigating the communication breakdown. We take patient consent very seriously." "But you didn't," I said coldly. "And now my son is in the NICU, and I'm recovering from surgery I never wanted." They offered apologies, again and again. But it didn't feel like enough. It felt like they were just trying to protect themselves. Later that night, back in my hospital bed, I cried silently while looking at the photo of my son on my phone. I had never felt so angry, so powerless. This wasn't how things were supposed to happen. I had read birth stories online, some full of joy, some full of pain. I never thought mine would be one where my voice was ignored, my choices stolen, and my baby pulled into the world during chaos. But I knew one thing, I wasn't going to let it end this way. I was going to speak out, for myself and for other women. I was going to tell the truth, even if it hurt. Even if people didn't want to hear it. Because this wasn't just a mistake. It was a violation. And I wasn't going to stay silent. The day I was finally allowed to leave the hospital felt both like a victory and a new beginning. My body was still weak, and my stomach throbbed with every movement, but my heart was heavier than I ever expected. I was going home without my baby, at least not fully yet. He was still in the NICU, fighting to grow stronger. My husband was by my side every step of the way. He had stayed with me through every sleepless night, every tear, and every panic-filled moment. I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, but also a fierce determination. He held my hand tightly, never letting go. "We'll get through this together," he kept telling me. And for the first time in days, I began to believe it. My family was a huge part of my strength, too. When they visited the hospital, they didn't just bring flowers or gifts, they brought love, support, and hope. My mother sat by my bedside and held my hand. "You're stronger than you know," she whispered. My sister brought my favorite snacks and told me stories about her own struggles and triumphs. My father, though quiet, showed up every day, his presence a steady reminder that I was not alone. Together, they helped me see that even though the beginning of this journey was filled with pain and disappointment, it wasn't the end. The first few days at home were the hardest. I was weak from the surgery and still filled with anxiety. Every moment I wasn't at the hospital felt like I was missing something important, like I was missing my son's first cries, his first breaths outside the womb. But the calls from the NICU kept me connected. The nurses gave updates on his progress, telling me he was eating better and gaining weight. Those updates were like little sparks of light in a very dark time. My husband was my rock. He took care of everything: meals, household chores, even keeping track of phone calls and appointments. When I felt like giving up, he was there to remind me why I had to keep fighting. "He needs you," he said. "And I need you too." We talked a lot about what had happened in the hospital: the epidural, the emergency surgery, the ICU stay. He never blamed me or made me feel weak. Instead, he listened patiently, held me when I cried, and helped me find words when I couldn't speak. One evening, as we sat quietly in the living room, he took my hand and said, "You're the strongest person I know. You survived something no one should have to go through. And you're going to be the best mom to our son." Those words filled me with a quiet power. I realized then that my voice, which had been stolen in the hospital, was coming back. I could use it, not just to tell my story, but to fight for what I believed in. My family also helped me in other ways. My sister researched everything she could about epidurals and VBAC, vaginal birth after cesarean, because I wanted to understand all my options if I ever had to give birth again. My mother came with me to every follow-up doctor's appointment, asking questions I didn't know how to ask. Their support gave me confidence. We also started preparing for the day I could bring my baby home. We set up the nursery, bought clothes and diapers, and made a plan to visit him every day in the NICU. Even in the middle of all this pain, hope was growing. But hope didn't erase the anger and fear. I still had so many questions about what had happened. Why had my wishes been ignored? Who had made the decision to give me the epidural? And what if things had gone differently? What if I hadn't woken up? With my husband's encouragement, I began to look for answers. We contacted a patient advocate, a person at the hospital who helps patients understand their rights. Together, we asked for my medical records and requested a formal review of my case. At first, the hospital was slow to respond. They sent polite letters, but nothing concrete. It felt like they were protecting themselves more than caring about what happened to me and my baby. But I refused to give up. Every day, I reminded myself, I had survived something terrible. I was still here, still breathing, still fighting. And I had people who believed in me, people who loved me. Slowly, my strength returned. Physically, I healed. The pain in my body eased, and I could walk longer without collapsing. Emotionally, I grew stronger, too. The fear that had gripped me began to loosen its hold. I started sharing my story with close friends and even some online communities. The response was overwhelming. So many women reached out, sharing their own birth stories, some filled with joy, others with pain and trauma. I realized I wasn't alone. And that made all the difference. One afternoon, while visiting the NICU, I finally got to hold my son in my arms for the first time since the emergency surgery. His skin was soft, his breath steady, and his little fingers wrapped around mine. In that moment, everything else faded away: the pain, the fear, the anger. It was just him and me. The beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where I was determined to be heard, to be respected, and to be the mother my baby deserved. Because no one should ever have their voice taken away during the most important moment of their life. After finally bringing my baby home, I thought the hardest part was behind me. But the truth was, the emotional battle was only just beginning. I kept replaying everything that happened in my mind: the epidural they gave me without my consent, the emergency surgery, waking up in the ICU without my baby. It felt like a nightmare I couldn't escape. But I knew I had to do something. Not just for myself, but for every woman who might face the same thing. I didn't want anyone else to lose control over their own birth story. With my husband's constant support, I started speaking out. At first, it was just small steps. I shared my experience with close friends and family. I wrote a journal to organize my thoughts and feelings. I even started a blog to document my journey, my pain, my recovery, and my fight for answers. Writing helped me heal. It gave me a way to process the trauma. But more importantly, it gave me a voice. The hospital's response to my requests for information was slow and frustrating. Every letter seemed like a brush-off. They said they were investigating, but no one ever called me with real answers. It made me angry, angrier than I thought possible. One day, my husband sat beside me while I read another vague letter from the hospital. "You deserve the truth," he said firmly. "And you're going to get it." He helped me find a lawyer who specialized in birth injuries and medical consent cases. At first, I was scared. I didn't want to cause trouble or be seen as difficult. But the lawyer explained that this wasn't just about me. It was about holding hospitals accountable. We filed a formal complaint. The process was long and exhausting, filled with meetings, paperwork, and hard questions. I had to relive the worst moments again and again. But every time I felt overwhelmed, I remembered why I started. My husband and family stood by me through it all. When I was tired or scared, they lifted me up. When I doubted myself, they reminded me how brave I was. They believed in me even when I struggled to believe in myself. Around the same time, I found a support group for mothers who had experienced birth trauma. Talking with women who understood what I was going through was a turning point. They didn't judge me for the anger or sadness. They listened and shared their own stories. Together, we helped each other heal. One woman in the group told me, "Your story matters. It can change things. Don't be afraid to speak your truth." Those words stayed with me. I started reaching out to local news reporters and parenting blogs to share my story publicly. It was scary putting myself out there, but I wanted to raise awareness about the importance of patient consent during childbirth. I wanted to make sure no woman felt as powerless as I had. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from women all over the country, thanking me for speaking up. Many shared their own experiences of ignored choices and traumatic births. Knowing I wasn't alone gave me strength. Slowly, I became an advocate, not just for myself, but for all women. I spoke at community meetings, joined online campaigns, and worked with healthcare organizations pushing for better education about epidurals, VBAC, and women's rights during childbirth. It wasn't easy. Some people told me to let it go, to forgive and forget. Others said I was making waves and causing trouble. But I knew standing up was the only way to find peace. And I wanted my baby to grow up knowing his mother fought for what was right. My son grew stronger every day. Watching him hit milestones like his first smile, his first steps, made every struggle worth it. He was my motivation to keep going. One evening, as I tucked him into bed, I whispered, "Mommy will always protect you. I promise." Even though the road ahead was still uncertain, I had found my voice. And with my husband and family beside me, I was ready to keep fighting. Because no one should ever lose their voice, especially not at the moment they bring life into the world. Months passed since we finally brought our baby home from the hospital. Every day felt like a new blessing. The tiny fragile newborn I had feared might not make it was now growing stronger and healthier right before my eyes. He began to smile, laugh, and respond to our voices. The sound of his first giggle was like music after all the silence and fear. Each milestone was a small victory that filled our hearts with hope and joy. My husband and I became a team, learning together how to care for our little boy. Sleepless nights, diaper changes, and endless feedings weren't easy, but we faced them side by side. Whenever I felt tired or overwhelmed, he reminded me how far we had come and how much love surrounded us. Our families continued to be an important part of our lives. They helped whenever they could, babysitting, cooking meals, or simply offering a shoulder to lean on. That support made all the difference during the hardest moments. We knew we didn't want to rush into having another child anytime soon. After everything we'd been through, we needed time to heal, to grow, and to focus on the baby we had fought so hard for. Our priority was giving him the best life possible. We talked often about the future, about how we wanted to raise him. We wanted to be present parents, teaching him to be kind, strong, and curious. We wanted to protect him, to listen to him, and to give him the freedom to be himself. Even though the memory of the difficult birth and hospital stay sometimes haunted me, it also made me more determined. I wanted to make sure our son knew how deeply he was loved, not just as a baby, but as a person. Watching him explore the world around him filled me with a sense of purpose. Every new word he learned, every step he took, reminded me why I had fought so hard, not just to bring him safely into the world, but to give him a happy, healthy life. We celebrated small victories together, his first birthday, his first Christmas, the first time he said Mama. Each moment was precious. Sometimes, I thought about the epidural and the emergency surgery, and the doctors who ignored my wishes. But those thoughts no longer controlled me. Instead, I focused on the love and strength that had carried us through. I had become more than a mother. I was a fighter, a survivor, and an advocate. And my husband, my family, and our son were the greatest gifts I could ever imagine. Together, we were building a new story, one filled with hope, healing, and endless love. No matter what challenges might come, we knew we could face them, together. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please like and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. If you've had a similar experience or want to share your thoughts, please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Take care, and see you in the next video.